Hello and welcome back to another episode of Name a Better Duo. I'm your girl Renee Nicole, and we are in this thing, okay? We are in the Where the Healing Resides series, and we're going to continue. Looks like our guest is here already. We're going to be talking healing from trauma with my good friend, return guest, Lillian Shepler, and she is here now. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Hey, your girl, Bree. Hey, beautiful. Hello. Look at you.
Well, I have to make sure I come on here looking correct.
Okay, and you came correct, okay?
I know you be putting your lashes on. I done glued my eyes shut.
Yes, I'm all the way. See, that's the one step I forgot, my lashes. But you got enough lash for the both
I'm
of us,
representing
okay?
for you today, okay?
You got it.
All right.
Thank you for coming back. Thank you so much. Thank you. We are so excited to get into this conversation, honey, okay? We have been talking healing. I know it's not something we're all that excited about, but it's a good thing because we're going to uproot some past trauma. We're going to uproot some things and heal. That's what we're all about, getting to where the healing resides.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to get to where the healing resides, and so I'm excited to have you back. Again, welcome everyone to another episode of Name a Better Duo. I am your girl, Renee Nicole. We are doing a 6-week series. This is our second season. Wow, it's been almost a year.
Yeah.
And we're doing, our second season is all about where the healing resides. It's been a crazy 12 months. For everyone. And I feel like there's a lot of things that we have to address. Some things, like I said, that we have to uproot in order to heal, in order to get to a place where we can actually be our best selves. So that involves some digging. That involves doing some work. But here we are, and I want to first thank you all for joining us. Thank you guys for tuning in week in and week out. And I'm going to introduce our guest for this evening. I'm so excited to have Miss Lillian Shepler. She is a social media influencer, blogger, and podcast host dedicated to empowering women to live to their full potential. She infuses her knowledge of God's word with her love for fashion and beauty in her blog, LoveALil.com, and on the style app LIKEtoKNOW.it. At the age of 15, Lillian was a victim of date rape, and she has spent years in therapy working to heal from the trauma that this violation has caused. She will share with us the steps to the healing. Welcome back, Lillian.
Thank you, Sissy, for having me back, for allowing me to be a part of this amazing platform that you have put together with your series. And, you know, I've been learning a lot about finances. I learned about, that was the last series, but thank you so much. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm so glad that you've been learning and so glad that you've been tuning in. So excited about some of the things that we're working on. So stay tuned for that. We're actually working on a podcast ourselves called the But God Podcast. We just got back from a little vacay, so we did some resetting and refreshing, and now we are ready to come back in full gear. And the first step, actually, I had a therapy session this morning, and she said, in order to get to where you want to be, you got to work on yourself, like career-wise, like the things that you want to do, you got to work on you first.
That's right.
And so that's what we're doing in these conversations, talking about healing. We're working on us. You know, we can't be who we need to be to everyone else if we don't work on self first.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Without any further ado, I want to hop into this conversation. First off, Lillian, tell me a little bit about your upbringing, your childhood, and how you were brought up.
So, how I was raised. No. So, how I was brought up. I was brought up in Brooklyn. I was born in the Bronx, but I'm a native of Brooklyn, New York. Shout out to BK. And so I am the child of a Puerto Rican mother and a German father, which is a crazy, crazy combination. I always get lots of like stares and shocks of like, what a combination, you know? And so I grew up in an Italian neighborhood. in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, 90s. And in my family's belief back then, and I think a lot of people at that time, it was of children were meant to be seen and not to be heard. You know, I wasn't allowed to express my emotions. I was actually taught to repress and suppress them. I wasn't allowed to say to my father, like, you hurt my feelings. You know, I hear these kids nowadays, they're very vocal on how they express themselves. They'll let you know when you hurt their feelings, which I find funny on one end, but I never had that freedom and luxury because that wasn't how I was raised. And so, yeah, that really had a big impact on how I and what I shared. You know, my father was, so my mom was from Puerto Rico. My mom is very old school in that way. She grew up very poor in the mountains of Puerto Rico. My father was American. My mom's American because Puerto Rico is part of America, but I always get that, like, you know, my father was raised in the Bronx and like he's not from Germany. His descendants are from Germany, but he was raised in the Bronx. So he had a very different way of upbringing. So he did give us freedom in the house to joke around or whatever. But again, it was never this like, tell me how you're feeling. Is something bothering you? It was more of suck it up. Don't let me see you cry, because if you cry, I'm going to give you something to cry about. So just get out of my face and go in the room. Wow. And that's how it was. The only emotion that I ever saw in my house was anger. You knew my dad was angry because he was cursing and he was loud, you know? So other than that, it wasn't, he was never like I always loved how daddy girl relationships. I didn't have that with my father. It wasn't until later in my life when I had my son that I became a mom and realized, how, wow, like this is the best thing in the world. How could you not want to be smothering this little person, you know? So that's how I was raised, to be quiet, not have an expression of emotions, and to just mask it, just cover it up, make it look good on the outside.
Wow. Okay. So that was your childhood. How did that carry on into teenage years and early adulthood?
Well, in the teenage years, it got a little bit more, it got a little more toxic with my father and I. Again, my father and I were very similar, and he gave me a lot of freedom to do a lot of things, and I was exposed to a lot of different things growing up. I mean, I was 13 years old when I had my, no, I think I was 12 when I had my first drink of alcohol, and I had a very alcoholic teenage time. I was drinking before school sometimes after school. Now I'm in middle school, 7th grade, 8th grade, and I'm drinking a 40 ounce of Old English. Or if we didn't have enough money, it was a quart, and we'd share it between 3 or 4 girls, you know? So it was a very toxic, now that I look back, that was a great way. But that was the way that I was, to me, that was normal, you know? Now being a mother, again, I look back at my son and I'm thinking when he's 14, 15, shit, sorry. You know, like what I was doing at his age compared to what he's doing, he's a saint, you know, playing video games and being on YouTube, that's a saint, you know. I didn't grow up that way. And so again, you know, we were very vocal. We were very, at that point, I had my voice. I did, you know, my father and I would get combative in arguments, and it would just not be a pretty thing. I rebelled a lot. I rebelled a lot. And, but nobody else would know it if we were around the family, put the mask on. Everything looked beautiful. We posed for our family pictures, you know, and things like that. But it was definitely a different way of being brought up. I share with some people, like, growing up in Brooklyn, where I grew up, is a whole, like, it's like planet Pluto. Like, it's unheard of to some of the people that I have as friends now, and like the experiences that, you know, we grew up. So yeah, it was I grew up pretty fast.
Got it. That's a good way to put it. So fast forward to age 15 and you experience this date rape. Explain that experience, the emotions you felt, and how that impacted you.
So I didn't feel any emotions, really, right? Because I wasn't allowing myself to. I I didn't know how to feel emotions. What I knew was shame, which is what I felt. I was 15.
Right.
I was a virgin. This was my first sexual encounter. This is what girls are dreaming to wait for, that special day that they have with their special someone. Right. And I didn't have that. This wasn't a special someone to me. This was a person that I met in the neighborhood, and it was a one-time, first time going out together with him. And when it happened, I blamed myself because I should have known better. I shouldn't have gone by myself. I shouldn't have drank as much as I was drinking. You know, I blamed a lot of these things on me. But, you know, someone would walk in that room and see me trying to physically fight him off of me. I mean, I had his skin underneath my fingernails, but he had held me down because he was bigger than me. I was smaller. And so when it happened, two people knew, two of my best friends when I was growing up. They both tried to confront him, but I didn't want anything more to be said about it. So they just dropped it. You know, one person did give him a whooping, but no one knew what was happening. Like when people were seeing like, why is so-and-so, my best friend at the time, why is she like arguing with him? No one knew. You know, so now that it's come out years later, people are like, that's why he did that. I mean, he tried to glue my friend's mouth shut with crazy glue because she was going off on him. And then my other friend was a male, and he beat him up. And people were wondering, like, where all of a sudden, why is he, you know, got this thing with him? But they never said anything. And so from that point of 15, I repressed the memory. I stuffed it, which is something I knew as a kid growing up, because when my father would yell at me, or when he would, you know, try to punish me, or what's the word? It's he when, you know, my father was mad at me.
Like
he would
chastise.
say such bad. I mean, listen, I know we are a PG-13 here kind of show, but my father used to call me the B. That was my name. Like, it would be nothing for him to call me a B. So for me growing up, I was raised again in this mentality of, he was looking out for me, my father, by calling me that. That's what he said. He was trying to make my skin tough, to make it thick like an alligator, so that I don't get upset when I'm out in the streets and someone else calls me a B. So it did work, because females can call me a B, and they have. It don't bother me. It doesn't bother me. My own father was doing it. But he wasn't doing it in that way of like in a malicious way, but he you know, I kind of understand what he was trying to do. But again, I would not do that to my own daughter. So when this whole thing came up, it was like, I got to suck this up. You know, I don't want to remember this. I don't want to talk about it. Don't ask me about it. And I just locked down and shut it down.
Yeah.
And so
that's a good, I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people on the outside looking in say, you know, why don't you say something, you know, go to the cops or tell your parents. But you speaking about it, you have to relive that experience. So absolutely. I'm sure that's one of the reasons why. Would you say that that's one of the reasons why a lot of people keep it to themselves?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, I love my mother to death. Everybody that knows me on social and knows me in my life know that my mother is like my everything. But as I was going through counseling, just last year or whatever, my mother has just learned about the rape. She didn't know about it. I never told her about it. Okay. I'm 45 years old today. She learned about it when I was 44. This happened when I was 15.
Wow.
You know, so she said, and you know, it's going to sound worse than I know my mother's heart. And she was like, why would you let him do that to you? And when she said that to me, I said, that's why I didn't tell you when it happened. Because of that statement right there. You think that I wanted someone to do this to me? You really think that? But my mother's mentality is very old school. My mother's very, very old school. You know my mother, Renee. She's very old school. She's from the, you know, she's a strong woman. She's one of 15 in her family. She's one of 10 sisters, and they're strong, you know. But I know she wasn't meaning it in a bad way, but it is the reason why I didn't say it. you know, when I with someone who physically abused me, okay? He almost killed me when I was 18 because I didn't want to be with him. He was upset about that. And when it happened, I went back to my parents' house to find shelter. When I got there, he was there. He got there before me. And so I walked in and he's talking to my dad in the back room. Now it's like 2:00 in the morning. He's talking to my father in the back room of the apartment. And I hear my father say, again, I love my father to death. He's passed or whatever. I know he didn't mean it in this way. He said, she probably deserved it because she mouths off too much and she doesn't know when to shut her mouth.
Wow.
And I lost it. That was that almost destroyed my father and I's relationship for a long time.
Yeah.
For a long time, we did not have a good relationship after that, because he said that. And so again, it's like, this is the way that I was brought up. So I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah,
you know?
it's not, it kind of goes back to the very first episode of this series where we talked about if you don't have that protection, like if you don't have the people that are supposed to protect you, you know, are your parents, you know, especially at that young of an age. And when you don't feel protected, it makes it that much harder to go out and have trust in the world, you know, to have healthy relationships when the foundational relationship is rocky, you know. It makes it a little more difficult to go out in the world and have successful relationships. So I can only imagine how much of how much work you've had to do over the years to get to this point. Like you said, if you had told your mother at that age, who knows how that response would have impacted you. What, you know, in comparison to now that you've done the work.
Exactly.
You know?
But I will say that, you know, it's not only that, you know, I know my family would have had my back. It's the part of being raised in that way of not being able to be heard. I was silenced as a child. I was taught,
and you're not allowed to feel.
Right. I was taught you're not allowed to speak.
Yeah.
You're just to be seen. Like I have an uncle, and my uncle would come over and my father would say, "Uncle's coming over. Come out, say hi, go back in your room. Just be seen. Go back in your room. Right. Don't have no conversations. Just say hi. Go back in your room." So in this situation that I was in, I can't tell them this because I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel safe.
Right.
For them to. Now, would my father have reacted in a, yeah, I know he would have. But it's that safety that you need to be able to have, because, you know, when people get raped or molested, you know, the first thing is, why didn't you tell anyone? Well, it's because the safety wasn't made there for me to feel comfortable.
Right.
You know, and I have an aunt who I'm very close with, and she was even a little like taken back at how I didn't share it and feel comfortable to tell her. And like, she and I were super close. But then again, shame, and that's what is the root of these kind of incidents, is a shut your mouth kind of thing. You know, like, don't you say anything. This is your fault. You deserve this. You know, it becomes the root, and that's what keeps you locked down. And that's what happened for me. I felt so shamed by it.
And why do you think so many people who are victims blame themselves?
Because you know, it's always that it takes two to tango. You had to know, right? You should have seen the signs. You know, like for me, I shouldn't have been drinking. I shouldn't have went by myself. I should have known better. I'm smart. I'm not dumb. Like, you know, it's all these things that, or gut checks. Right. You know, I just talked to my counselor a little while ago, and we were talking about like how my gut, you know, you get a gut check, but you know, sometimes you can push past that gut check. And so that's what happens. You push past the gut check. And so, but the shame part of it, it just, it keeps you there. There's no pushing that out. That thing just really, unless you get into some deep counsel, you know, and do the work, that sucker will have you bound. And it had me bound for, I was 15 when it happened. I went into counseling when I was 38 is when I recalled the memory of it. 38. I mean, that's like what, 26 years or something like that, you know, like, and it happened because I was in counseling for anxiety. I was having a lot of anxiety. I was like super anxious. Like I didn't know what was happening. And so I went for anxiety for, you know, to help me with that. And I was also in a toxic relationship. And the person I was with, he forced himself on me one time in this time. And it just all flooded. The whole thing.
It was a trigger.
It was a major trigger. I mean, he forced him. He was bigger than me. He's stronger than me. I'm trying to fight him off. Now I'm in a relationship. You know, so like they talk about domestic violence in as a husband wife, but there is domestic dating violence that happens that no one really talks about. And it's so weird how God worked it out. I had gone to a domestic dating violence training seminar. So I kind of knew, like, oh my gosh. So when it happened and all of this started coming up, I was in counseling and I went to my counselor and I was really distraught. And I told her what happened. Obviously, I ended my relationship with that person. And she walked me through a healing prayer ceremony. It was a Christian therapy ministry for counseling. And so she walked me through this healing prayer. So I went through the healing prayer. I thought I was done.
Right.
Thought I was done.
Yeah.
2019, the anxiety starts coming back.
Yeah.
Why? What's happening? I'm thinking I'm losing weight. My hormones are unbalanced. I'm in perimenopause. Bunch of crazy stuff going on here. But then I developed an eating disorder. So I needed help. So in 2020, you know, I reached out to a counselor and I asked for help. And they did the intake. And in the intake, she diagnoses me and she says, you have avoidance restrictive food intake disorder. What is that? So basically what that is that I avoid certain foods. I was eliminating things from my diet and I was restricting my diet more and more. Okay. How do we fix that?
Right.
And then she says, have you ever been sexually assaulted? What does that have to do with my eating disorder? Well, it has a lot to do with it. Really? So I think this lady is out there.
Right.
A friend of mine contacts me and he is a man of God and he has a counseling service that he provides for like sex trafficked victims and sexual assault victims. And he always touches in with me. And he was like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Whatever. And I'm like, I'm good. The mask is on real tight, you know, like I'm good. And he's like, no, give it up, you know, and he's prying. And I'm still with the mask, like, no, everything's good. I'm happy. Like, everything's good. Then I say, oh, well, you know, I got this new thing now, this eating thing, whatever. Come on. So, you know, I share with him about the eating thing and the anxiety. And then he says, I'm going to ask you something personal. And I'm like, okay, what is it? He says, have you ever been sexually assaulted? I'm like, why are you asking me that?
Right.
And he's like, because eating disorders go hand in hand with sexual assault.
Wow.
And I said, oh my gosh. Like I was washing this other lady off like, she's crazy. You know, what's she talking about? So that he then tells me I need to read a book. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. Why? He said, because your body was violated. And you suppressed that memory, but you never took care of your body. It remembers. The mind and the body are two different things.
That's
they
good.
work together. And I was like, oh, really? So, you know, I listened to him. I got the book. I go back to my counselor, the eating disorder counselor, and she says, I have an assignment for you. I need you to get this book. She pulls up the book. I said, you gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me. You know, I was waiting for the book to come. And so I said, I have just ordered that book. I'm waiting for it to come. later that day, I'm in a ministry intercessory prayer call. I'm in a training, and they're talking about trauma. And the person running the webinar says, oh yeah, and the great resources. I said, Lord, if she says that book, no.
Wow.
And sure enough, she pops up and she's like, The Body Keeps the Score.
Wow.
I'm like, this book better get here ASAP.
Right. That's just so wild that, these two individuals knew to ask you that question, because trauma comes up in different ways. Like the PTSD of a traumatic event can reoccur in different ways.
Isn't that crazy?
And it's so crazy. And for you, it was anxiety, eating disorder. How would you say, do you think that PTSD ever has an end? Like, do we do the work and then it comes to an end? Or is it something that you have to readdress over and over again? Like you said, it came back years later, the anxiety came back.
But I never addressed the PTSD.
Mm-mm.
I actually never even knew that I had PTSD.
Wow.
I thought it was anxiety.
Yeah.
No one told me about it was PTSD. No one ever told me that this is what was happening until I met these two counselors. And I just love how God worked it out. They were coming from two different spectrums. She's an eating disorder counselor. He's a sexual assault victim counselor. His is a ministry, full-blown ministry. She's working in the secular work, but she's a believer. But God knew my heart was that I need counseling and they need to be believers. Yeah. Because you're not going to try to guide me off into thinking and praying to the universe and some crystal.
Come on.
Sorry. No. So to answer your question, can you get rid of? Yes. I just talked to my counselor about this afternoon, and we said yes. The thing is, the experience that happened to me, I can never take that away. I can never, ever be done with it. It's happened to me. It is not me. Mm-hmm. It's not it doesn't identify with me. So what happened was, for so many years, when I repressed the memory, when I felt ashamed, I identified with this being my fault. I took ownership of something that had nothing to do with me. The one thing I always hated was I never wanted to be seen. And that's another reason why I stood shut, was because I never wanted to be seen as a victim. I never wanted anybody to feel sorry for me. Growing up the way that I grew up in my neighborhood, in my family, we are not weak girls. We were not weak girls. We didn't take any BS. And I think that's also has been a problem for me because of the mask that I wear. It shows that I have confidence. It shows that, I am strong, but it's a mask.
The mask.
It's a lot of stuff that's gone on behind the mask, and so doing the work, it's let me realize, like, you know what, this stuff is not going to define me. So when I got through the process, I learned, who am I? It's not my fault. Like I said earlier, if somebody would have walked in and saw him and me ripping his back apart, him muffling my mouth, holding me down, no one would have ever said that I deserve that and that it's my fault.
Right.
So why should I? When my counselor walked me through this, he made me relive it. He made me write a letter to my assaultant person, right? He made me write a letter to him. I didn't want to do this. Right. And I thought, okay, that's it. I'll have to. And he said, now you need to read it. And I had to read what I felt. Like I said, I was 15. I was a virgin. This was my first sexual encounter. And he stole something from me. Yeah. He stole my identity because I picked up his identity. And because I didn't want to be a victim, caring about what I look and perceive, I stood with this. But until my counselor, when he was like, if anybody would have walked in that room and seen that, they would have never blamed you. Yeah. No one would have ever. And it was like, after that session, everything just broke. Everything just broke in me. And just like all the weight of me carrying this on, not even realizing that I was carrying it on in my body. Yeah. My body remembered the trauma of the incident. Yeah. Men that are in battle, they remember being on the battlefield, seeing the bullets flying, hearing the noises and all of these things. And their bodies also remember the tension, the stress that they feel when they were in that. And we need to get healed from that. And that was something I didn't learn until now. So you can, as long as you learn who you are and you know that that's something that happened to you, it's not who you are, you can get your freedom and you can become who God created you to be, you know?
Yeah. I can only imagine that the mental work or the mental battle even that had to be to perform that exercise, because I feel like for me, like I've mentioned before, you know, with therapy, one of my fears was reliving experiences, you know, and resurfacing those emotions and those
Right.
feelings that you thought you just suppressed, but you thought you got over because of time, or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
what does that take? You know, I feel like that's one of the things that keeps people from doing the work, is just wanting to forget. But
Exactly.
that's
That's
not
the biggest
possible.
lie the enemy will have you to believe.
Yeah.
That's the biggest lie the enemy will have you to believe is don't go into therapy because you're going to have to relive all of the pain and all of the things that you don't want to relive. And you know what? Yes, you are. I'm going to tell you, yes, you are. But you will come out better by going through it. Because now when you go through it, God is there. You see God. Like, you know, that was one of the things, like in the beginning, it was like, you know, God was in that room with you. And I was like, well, if he was, why did that happen to me? You know, like,
Yeah.
you know, but we have free will. You know, God's not going to intervene, but God is going to love me and he's going to protect me. And he did. You know, he changed the way, like my counselor just said today, the picture is the same, but he put it in a different frame.
Yeah.
So it looks different. Now you're looking from the outside as opposed from being in it.
Yeah.
You know, if
And
that
you're going with different intention. I feel like, you know, when you're going through the experience, it does just feel like it's happening
correct.
to you. But
Right.
when
When I
you're
went
going
into
in
therapy,
it with an intention to evaluate and to get
get
to the
healed.
root and heal, you know, I feel like the experience is a little bit different. Um, and we're able to actually do that. We're able to actually heal rather than just going through the emotions. I feel like sometimes we think that, you know, we're going to have to relive this thing and it's going to be so painful, it's going to be so dramatic or whatever. But it's being okay. I think we, like you said earlier, we think that we have to be so strong. We
Right.
think that we have to put on this brave face all of the time. And in order
Mhm.
for us to gain strength, the word of God says this, we have to be weak.
That's
Like
right.
we have to be weak and pull on God's strength. So I think that, you know, we have to, especially as women of color, we have to be okay with being weak, being vulnerable, you
We have to
know,
be okay with being okay.
in order to regain the strength that was stolen from us, you know,
Absolutely.
with these type of experiences.
Absolutely. But the key thing that you said was root. So one of the things when I went into this therapy, I came in and I was like, here's the deal, guys. I want to grab the root of whatever this
Yeah.
is, and I want to hold it in my hands and just squish the living life out of it. I don't
Yeah.
want this to come up in my life anymore because I had
Mm.
thought I did the work. That was too easy now that I realize it, you
Yeah.
know? And so in going in and getting the root, yeah, when you get to the root, that's the blood supply. That's the thing that's feeding this thing. When I got to the root and I wrote that letter and I had to read that letter out loud and I had to physically, visually walk through the experience again, but I walked through it with God and
Yeah.
his love. And I knew again, when I'm coming out of this, I'm coming out of this healed.
Yeah.
I'm not coming out of this anymore a prisoner to this thing. This is not me.
Right.
You know, this ain't me. And it's never gonna be me again. You know, it had that moment, it had what happened, that's fine.
Because I
But
feel like sometimes even we, when we go through a traumatic event, we like to downplay
yeah,
the experience. We want to say, oh, you know, especially, oh, that happened years ago. I'm over that. And it comes up in other ways, and that's the reason why we don't always recognize it, but it's still very, very prevalent. You know, it's
mm-hmm.
still very much an issue because we never addressed it. And I don't want anyone watching to think that, you know, I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to downplay what your experience is, everything
No.
that you go through. And I think that's one of the good things about speaking with a professional is that they're able to pull some of your current patterns and current habits and get to the root, like we said, of what caused them.
Yeah.
And that is so important because we can say, oh, I'm stressed at work. We can think, oh, it's the kids, or you know, it's this, that, or so forth. But a lot of the time it stems from something deeper, and we have to dig deep and be willing to face the facts.
Yeah. Yeah.
This thing hurt me and it
That is
affected me
huge.
in this way.
That is huge. That is one of the things that really got to me was, so again, the mind and the body, two different things, right? But always thought one thing. So I thought I'm going to suppress this memory. I'm not going to remember this. That's what it is, whatever. But in reading this book, I learned, no. My mind was told to forget about it. But my body wasn't told. My body was still in this stress state of fight or flight kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
That's why the anxiety was coming up, you know. It was in different, I didn't realize things that were happening in my life, in the relationships I was having, they were triggering me little by little. But because I was not good at reading, so one thing I learned is I know how to read your body language. I was terrible at reading my own body language. Our bodies have a language and they speak to us. We have to learn to acknowledge our bodies, honor their voice, give them the freedom to say what's going on. So sometimes I know in this process, I was going through learning my body. Okay, body. And I would sit there, and I told you, I would sit there and I would be like, something would feel something wrong or whatever. And I'm like, what's going on? Okay, body. What is it? What's going on? What do you feel? You know, are you okay? I mean, because I had to learn to talk to myself as a 5-year-old.
Yeah. Because
we, as women of color, we come from strong women. Got a lineage of strong women in my family. You as well. They don't have time for this. This is my mother's mentality. I don't have time for that. But no, but if I was 5 years old, you'd make the time to listen, to hear me out now, especially now in this culture where everyone, you know, has a voice and everyone is allowed to speak. So I've had to learn to be gentle to myself and talk to myself in the mirror and be like, what's wrong, honey? Are you okay? Whereas before I'd be like, girl, you better suck that up.
Right.
You better fix your face. You know, you better keep it moving. Don't let nobody see you struggling. Don't let nobody know that you got problems, you know?
Yeah.
But that's not healthy. And so when you started this podcast interview, this interview earlier, you said, like, we have to take care of us first. My number one analogy, and you know it, is that flight attendant putting that air mask on. Okay? Put the mask on yourself first. But again, we grow up as women of color in our communities, in our family, that we have to take care of everybody else but us. And that's the worst, again, lie from the pit of hell.
Wow.
He's going to try to keep you busy so that you don't take care of you. So that when he comes in, he's going to come in and the stupidest, littlest thing is going to knock you flat on your back. Yeah. I know it's happened to me. I'm like, how did that happen? How did that person get over on me like that? Like, how come I didn't see that? Because I was so tired and worn out from being and doing everybody else's stuff. So now, in 2019 or 18, actually, I declared when I started my blog, I'm not worried about other people, and not in a malicious way. I care and I love everyone. I have to take care of me first. I have to tend to my body, my mind, my responsibilities. Yeah. And then I can go and
then you can give. You have more to give. It's just like trying to drive on empty.
You don't have, right?
I wrote that this morning. Like, you are driving on empty. Fill up.
Right.
Fill up the tank, you know, and you have to do that by taking the time, first of all, to learn yourself.
That's right.
I think that's one of the issues a lot of the time. Like you said, just recognizing a lot of the time we don't even recognize what we're experiencing. You know, we want to identify it as anger when in actuality it's you're shutting down because of a trigger or because of something reminds you of a past experience and you don't even know. So taking the time to learn yourself is so important,
It's
and
number
that's
one.
something that I want everyone to do, and that's the reason for this series, is because I feel like a lot of us are just kind of cruising through without learning, you know, what it takes to be our best selves, without learning what it takes. Like we can have more success in all the things that we're seeking if we actually learn ourselves and take the time to heal.
Yeah.
I want to, one of the reasons why I want to have this conversation, I know there's so many of us who have, you know, past experiences. There's people who are going through, have recently experienced a traumatic event. How can we change our response? What is the right response to that type of event? And how can we just shift that so that we're not going through generations of the same type of anxiety and frustration that we never address?
I think what we talked about is about talking about it,
Yeah.
sharing, giving it a voice. Again, the number one scheme of the enemy is to shut you down, right? We all hear about isolation. If you let him, you know, close you off, put you in a corner, in a pit, right?
Yeah.
That's the worst. You know,
Yeah.
it's like the worst thing for a boxer. Where's the worst place for a boxer to be in a boxing ring? In the corner. He is going to get jammed up and hemmed up and body blowed, ribs broken, all kinds of stuff because he is in that corner. He's got to get out of the corner. And so we've got to get out of our own corners because we put ourselves there. We can't blame it on anybody else. We have to take accountability for us as well and say, you know what? I'm not going to be held back anymore. There is strength in your voice. We've seen that, right? In 2020, we've seen people speak up. Well, actually, before 2020, that whole Me Too movement, what happened? These women got up and they spoke about stuff. That's why Harvey Weinstein's in prison right now. That's why Bill Cosby is in prison right now, because they said enough is enough. I've got to speak up about this stuff. And you have to speak up. And when you speak up about your pain, I cannot tell you how me now speaking about it has brought more healing to me than me shutting it down and holding it inside before for all those years. Now people are in just conversation, you know, talking to me. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, well, and I'll share.
Yeah.
This is my experience. You know, that's God. That's, that is the working of the Holy Spirit to bring us help, right? Yes. And I would say counseling. Counseling is the number one thing. Like, again, I am of the Christian faith and I feel I need Christian counselors. I don't not go to secular counselors. I am in a secular counseling program, but she's a Christian. And you can have that too. For me, what I said is most important is I always go to the Holy Spirit first and foremost. He's my counselor. That's what Christ said that he's given him to me. I go to God. God then will lead me, and he led me on a Saturday morning in the middle of February in the back roads of Manassas as I was driving an Instacart delivery to hear on the radio this person from a eating disorder counseling program talk about it. And that's what made me make the call and how I got connected to my counselor. Wow. You know, so counseling for me, I'd say I triple teamed it because I had the Holy Spirit, I had my eating disorder counselor, and I have a trauma counselor. If I didn't have all three, because one was working in my mind, one was working in my body, and the Holy Spirit is working in my whole spirit. They all three were helping me in their own ways. Now, I will say there are some times you're going to feel like this ain't working. This ain't working. Don't give up. Yeah. Again, that's the scheme of the enemy. There's plenty of times I thought my eating counselor, she can kick rocks. She ain't really helping me.
I told you that about my therapist. I was like, I could just talk to a friend about this.
But I told you, what did I tell you? Stick it out.
Going.
Stick it out. Yeah. It'll work itself out for you. So
Yeah.
for me, again, it's just counseling and talking about it, sharing about it. Use your voice as power.
Yeah. And it's
Don't stay
important
shut.
to find places where you do feel safe and people that you can trust, because I think that's one of the
Absolutely.
issues. Like you even expressed, when you were 15, you didn't feel like you had someone that you can necessarily go to, with this type of situation. So I
Absolutely.
think that, it's easier said than done,
It is.
especially when you're young and you're going through this thing that is just so, out of the ordinary.
And
But
especially then, when I was growing up, different from today, people talk about it more. There's lots of conversations. Look,
yeah,
there's a
yeah,
conversation happening right here, right? So it's not to say that the kids can say, well, no one ever told me that I can talk to, or I should talk to, or how I should talk to.
right,
When I was growing up, it wasn't told,
right.
it wasn't discussed. Yes, did my parents say, if anybody ever touches you down there or does anything to you when I was little, come and tell me,
Right.
But again, as I got older, I didn't feel safe to come and tell them.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like they're going to listen to me. And I think that's what happens too with a lot of, especially when children are young and they get molested and things like that. They're shamed into feeling like no one's going to believe me.
Right.
They're going to think I'm making it up.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. But I think in today's culture where we are, there's so many people talking about it, which is why I feel like losing its power little by little.
I think that, yeah, that's good. So just to sum up everything we've conversed about, speak to someone, don't be ashamed. It's not your fault. Be willing to, once you've spoken, once you've shared your experience with a trusted, if you're young, with a trusted adult, um, if you're, an adult, to share it with, go to the police if you need to. You
Right.
need to have your
Right.
body evaluated, things like that. Do that because it's going to help you heal.
Yeah.
And that's what the conversation here is about, is just not allowing this to keep you bound and not allowing this to keep you from progressing and finding your way in life, because that oftentimes is what it does. And we want to see each and every one of you actually get to a point where you can be proud of yourself. Like,
Yeah.
I overcame that. I went through this traumatic experience, but I overcame, and now I can feel comfortable sharing my testimony and helping someone else. A lot of the time we keep things to ourselves, not knowing how much we can help someone else,
Exactly.
and not knowing that you're not the only one, that there's someone out there that has, gone through a similar experience and can walk you through it, and hold your hand. You don't have to be alone. I think,
Yeah.
like you said, that is one of the biggest tactics of the enemy, is to keep us feeling lonely, feeling like we're in this by ourselves, feeling isolated.
Yeah.
But if we are bold and courageous and say what we are experiencing, say how we're feeling, we'll start to learn ourselves, and we'll know how to avoid those triggers and those things that spark that emotion or that energy in us again.
Yeah,
So
you'll learn it through the course of going through, the thing that I want to say, and this is what my counselor has told me in the beginning, this healing from this post-traumatic event, it was an event that happened to me. I am on a journey. So like when I got into counseling, I wanted to know, how many weeks is this going to take?
Right.
Is this a 10-week program or a 6-week program? Like, how long is this going to take? And he was like, you need to stop with the how long is it going to take, because you need to understand that this is not an event that happens within a window of time. This is a journey. You're going to be on this journey for the rest of your life. And so when we talked to him today, he was like, again, I had mentioned, like something came up in me when we met someone out in Florida, something came up in me and I was like, does that mean that I'm still broken? Like why, and he was like, no, nope, no. He's like, you're on a healing process, and you knew when you met the person that something was wrong. It hit you, you now learned your triggers,
Yeah.
The other thing I want people from when they walk away from listening to this is to understand that whatever's happened to you, it is not you. It doesn't define you as a person, who you are. We cannot go back in the past and change what happened to me. It's like spilling the milk and trying to get it back in the carton. That's not going to happen. You better just get those bounties and the mop and mop it up and clean it up. But it doesn't mean that you're a bad person because of whatever's happened to you. You're a good person. God loves you. It doesn't mean God doesn't love you because that thing happened to you. You know, you have great purpose. Everybody has purpose. Everyone has a plan that God has written out for them. My situation happened to me. He's taking, right? What does Romans 8 says, that he takes the things that have happened to us, the bad things, and he turns them into good things. You know, we hear about, we take those lemons and making lemonade, you know, the sour experiences in our life, but let's make something a refreshing drink from it. Yeah. And the same thing can happen from these traumatic experiences. And that's what I hope that people get from this, is to know that you're not whatever happened to you. You are beautiful. You are healed. And you can be healed. It's not just for me. It's not just for Renee. You can get it too. You just have to do the work. I know earlier you talked about the brain work, the mind work. That's a lot of work. It is a lot of work. It's not like doing 15 jumping jacks. Right. The mind part of it is very, very intense, because you got to go back and dig things out. You know, the mind plays a lot of tricks on you. You know, our memories are not 100% exactly what has happened. Each day they get something changes, something changes, something changes. You know, so the mind work, it's hard, but it's worth it. Because you're worth it, right? Aren't you worth it? Yeah. That's the thing we have to understand and believe in, our value. That was something that he took from me too. I didn't value myself. So I was in these toxic relationships as a teenager, as a grown adult, you know, as a woman, having toxic relationships, not realizing this all stemmed because of the belief that formed when I took on the ownership of this rape. When I took on this, I deserve this. This is me, my fault. That's not true. I don't deserve anyone to put their hands on me. I don't deserve anyone to take anything from me. And neither does anyone else listening to this recording. Right, right. Value yourself, because, like you said, we all have purpose. And it's bigger than us, you know. God created us. You know, I think a lot of the time when we speak bad about ourselves or we look down on ourselves, we neglect the fact that God created us. Like, you're talking about God's creation, you know? So you have to really recognize your value. And like you said, you are not this experience. You are not this traumatic experience. That is not your identity, you know? But you have to do the work to get outside of that and recognize that who you really are, you know, and who you're going to become through this. Exactly. You know? Who you're going to become through this. You know, one of my favorite scriptures when I was going through for years has been Psalms 143. I think it's 13 or 14, that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are the works of God. Yeah. And that's me. And that's you. Yeah. And so you have to declare that and decree that over yourself, even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. Right? Yeah. You got to say that thing, and it takes time for you to start feeling it and owning it. Yeah. But keep doing it. Keep doing it. And you'll see that you're becoming, like you said, you're going to become the person that God created you to be. Yes. Do the work. I love it. This has been good. This has been really good. It was a deep conversation, a tough conversation, but it's very necessary. Just like last week, very necessary, because, you know, if we allow it, these type of experiences can get the best of us. They can kill us. They can kill our spirits, you know. But we have to really, really dig deep so that we can become even better through such a terrible experience. So thank you for being open and transparent, and for sharing your story, and for trusting us with that story. I know that so many people are going to be blessed by your testimony and the way that you are overcoming
and doing the work to overcome. So thank you so much. I've seen so many comments here thanking you, Lillian, and just saying how just great everything you shared has been. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We are going to play a quick game
Of course.
this or that. You already know we don't end without playing our this or that game, and some of it's going to be a lot along the lines of what we spoke, and some of it's not at all. You
My
know,
favorite song by Black Sheep, I'm just saying, from the 90s. This or that. This.
Oh, yes. I should make that my theme music for
You
the
should.
game.
You need to have that. You can get with this, or you can get with that.
Yes,
You
I
can
love
get
it.
with that. That's one of my favorites.
I love it. Good times. Okay. All right, so let's get started. This or that. First question. Group therapy or one-on-one counseling?
I say one-on-one counseling.
Okay.
Because it's a lot of stuff you got to dig out.
Yeah.
And I think when you're in a group, it's hard to be heard. And the whole reason why you're going for counseling is to be heard. So I think in the beginning, one-on-one, and then you can grow into do group counseling. But I think in the beginning, one-on-one.
Yeah, I think that, sometimes people feel nervous about having to just be you and that therapist or you and that counselor.
Yeah.
But I feel at the same time, you're going to get the most out of it that way.
Absolutely.
In group counseling, it's easier to be quiet. It's easier not to share. But when you're one-on-one, you're actually going to the root of your issues so that they can be uprooted and not hide behind the other people in the room. So
yeah,
I agree.
Absolutely. Or you can lose out on time, right? Like, oh, time's up. Next week.
Right. Okay, next one. Sharing your testimony with the masses or only to a few trusted individuals?
I'm all about sharing it to the masses. Because I believe there's healing in that. I don't believe that anything that I've gone through, I don't know that if I share it with one person, I mean, it could be impactful. But I think when you share it with, but then again, if you share it with one person, you're sharing it with the masses too, because that one person takes that information and they share it with someone else. Either they hold it for themselves as like the bone carrier, or they bank it. And maybe if you've ever been in a situation where you're talking with your girlfriends and you just heard something, you're like, oh, I just heard somebody else was going through that, So the masses is for me, I guess.
Yeah, the masses for you. Okay, last one. Audible or physical book?
Come on now. Now you know.
That's why I had to ask.
That is so not fair because I do both.
I know.
I do both. I love, this might sound weird, don't judge me, people. I love the smell of paper in a book. I was that kid when you were in school and you got remember before they had copy machines, they had that reprograph machine that had the alcohol that they put in there, and your test papers, you're probably too young for this, Renee.
Oh,
you get your papers would come and the ink would still be fresh and wet. Where are all my people that grew up in the 80s and the 70s? And you just smell that paper, and it just smelled like pure rubbing alcohol. I was like, I love the smell of paper. So books I like because I like the tangibleness of them. But I love an audiobook because I do a lot of driving.
Right.
So I buy them sometimes both.
Yeah, they both have pros. For me, it's about who's reading the book. Like the Kevin Hart book. I know I'm going to get a good laugh. I know he's going to say it in his crazy, quirky self, So that's when I want an Audible. But I like to read a physical book too sometimes because I like to I want to hear it in my voice sometimes. I don't know. Like I want to make up my own voice for the characters, and because I read a lot more fiction than. So I think that's the reason
different. Too. Well, that's different. But I read a lot of neuroscience books, personal development books. Those books are paper for me.
Yeah.
The Audible books are like the stories of Kevin Hart, Michelle Obama.
Right.
For me, I feel like it's a conversation. Like I feel like Kevin Hart's sitting in my front seat of my car, and we're driving up the road together, and he's just talking in my ear.
You can, right?
So
yes. But good. I love it. I had to ask you that because I know you're an avid reader.
Yeah.
But this has been amazing as always. Thank you for coming back. You are now Name a better duo, alumni, okay?
Oh, wait, I didn't have my cup. No, we have oh, I do have a name better duo cup. Dang, I forgot my cup.
Yeah,
But I
it's
do.
all good. Next time. But no, I'm so, so grateful for you again for sharing your story, for coming in and telling the folk how we can get to where the healing resides. Thank you so much, Lillian. Let people know where they can find you.
On Instagram, what is I don't even know my name. I think it's underneath Lillian Shepler. I think it goes by that. Or you can go to my website, LoveALil.com. And I'm on LIKEtoKNOW. Again, it's connected to my Instagram. It's all in my profile on Lillian Shepler. So
Yes,
that's it.
yes. Thank you. Thank you again. Go follow Lillian. Follow everything she's doing. Look out for the But God podcast coming
Yes,
next
guys.
month. We're excited about that. But until then, get to where the healing resides. Do the work. Get to your best self. That's what I encourage you all to do. Take this time this weekend to just breathe, do some woosah, okay, and get to know you and do whatever you have to do. Look up therapists, write down 10 things. I'm gonna give you some homework. Write down 10 things that you love about yourself.
Ooh.
And bring them back next Friday, okay?
Ooh.
For the last episode of Where the Healing Resides. It will be the final episode of this series. I'm so excited, so grateful for each of you for coming every week. But we'll be back next Friday, 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Until then, have a great weekend. Love you guys. Have a good one. Thank you, Lillian.
Ciao.
Have another day. You're here, and grief will kill you if you let it.
If you let it.
If you let it, grief will kill you. And it won't just kill you in the physical sense. It will kill you mentally. It will kill your spirit. It will kill your appetite. It will kill your weight. It will kill your weight. It will kill everything about you, your personality, the way you look at life, the way you view at life, everything about a loss. It changes everything.
Yeah.
And you have to work double and triple hard. I always say grief is a choice, because it is. How hard are you going to allow it to affect your life? How hard are you going to let it, put you in this mind state? How long are you going to allow grief to, debilitate you so you can't go to work? You can't do the things you have to do, because life moves on, unfortunately. And even
welcome back to another episode of Name a Better Duo. It's your girl Renee Nicole, and I'm so excited to be here in my on-the-go studio today. Oh, and our guest is here already. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be a deep one, but it's also a very necessary one. So let's bring Felicia on in. Here she comes. Hey guys. Hey Ash. Hey Issa and Pretty.